if metcons are something that you like to do that don't really affect you in a negative way, like if you feel really good after you're done doing them and you're like going on with your day and that's like something that stokes you out, then awesome, like great. But I would say a build up to a marathon, and you've put in a good 12 weeks of training, and you want to, like, you know, say you're doing a 16-week build up, and the last 4 weeks, like, I don't think you may not need them, you know. And you could probably speak to that, Rich, because you probably have come to those crossroads.
Yeah, you know, I've done both. You know, when I first got out to California, when we first met, and I was, you know, heavy into the CrossFit endurance, you know, I did that sort of stuff where I was doing those, you know, that type of metabolic conditioning and, you know, trying to race at the same time as doing those, you know, and now I've kind of transitioned back more to, you know, your traditional type of running training, but have learned to balance, you know, the strength side of things into that. You know, and typically, like you mentioned before, for me, you know, going to the gym and doing CrossFit and metabolic conditioning, like for me, I enjoy the social aspect of it. You know, I like to go hang out with my friends, and, you know, a lot of times as we get older, we don't have the time to hang out like we did when we were younger. You know, people have families and kids and stuff, and, you know, maybe their only free hour of the day is to get to the gym and hang out. Well, I don't want to, you know, miss that opportunity, because otherwise I may not see that person for, you know, weeks or months, you know, even years at times with people. They get busy with family and work and all that stuff. So
totally,
you know, I like to do that stuff, and I do it in the off season more, you know, and sometimes I might even do that more than I actually run in the off season. But, you know, as I get, you know, 3 months out, I tend to cut that sort of training out and just focus on skill work with, you know, calisthenics and gymnastics, and then just, you know, trying to work on absolute strength, you know, and things like that. But I found that, you know, doing the metabolic conditioning while trying to specifically train for a race, especially if I'm not programming the metabolic conditioning, can leave me feeling pretty beat up, you know, be it because it's a long workout, or even with scaling it, it's still pretty heavy. You know, so I've just learned to avoid those sorts of things. And, you know, people want to know where I'm at, you know, they want to know if everything's all right. And it's just like, I know if I go there when that sort of stuff is going on, I'll give into the peer pressure, because I've done it before, and I end up doing that stuff when I probably should be, you know, relaxing or mobilizing and focusing more on the running. And, you know, for me, I don't want to do anything that's going to take away from the running in those, you know, last 2 to 3 months of training.
Totally. Yeah, and you said a couple of really good things there. You talk about balance. I always think that's great. Work, life, balance, working out, all that stuff, man. Balance everything. That should be a good, I don't know, a tagline or some sort. Hashtag. Balance everything.
For sure.
But I mean, and you also said off season too. I think a lot of, you know, I've been guilty of this, and I think I've said it before in the podcast. You know, like having an off season, having an off time of running is so important, and those are times where you can find out these new things that you may want to incorporate into your running. And don't let an off season, don't misinterpret an off season for an injury, because that does not count. Injury is a forced break, and off season is a chosen break. Okay, so don't confuse those two. But having an off season will allow you to kind of, you know, have a break from running. Enjoy those days off your feet. You know, in the mornings, maybe, you know, walk the dog, or you know, go for a little hike or something, you know, something fun, go for a surf, whatever you do. But yeah, having that off season is crucial, and anyone will tell you, like, that's, you know, classic periodization. It's a part of growing as a runner, as a cyclist, as any endurance athlete. You need to be periodization. You need to be doing it correctly, or you're not gonna see as many gains as you'd like. But if we're getting into training aspects, you had a big weekend with doctor. Is he a doctor? Yeah, he's got to be a doctor.
Yeah,
Jack Daniels.
Sure.
So yeah, number one question from me is, how tall is he?
He's taller than me. I would say he's probably not that that's saying much. I would say he's probably around 5'8", 5'9".
Oh yeah, I pictured him like super tiny. So yeah, I just I'm actually just bullshitting, but like I literally thought he was just this like small guy in a lab, like like maybe like just a little bit bigger than Dexter, and just kind of like this mastermind, But now, all kidding aside, though, how was it? How was your experience? Please share.
It was good, and I was gonna segue off of what you were saying too, because you were talking about taking rest and that sort of stuff, and that was one of the big takeaways I got from the weekend. Was one of the things that Jack said was that rest is part of training, not avoiding it. And that's, I think, very crucial for a lot of people, is that they, whatever it may be, especially in my background with endurance athletes, or even on the CrossFit side of things, is that people oftentimes view rest as maybe a weakness, or they're missing out on something, or they're going to lose a step, and as I've gotten older and coached a lot of athletes, and then also dealt with some injuries and stuff, and one of the best years I had in 2014 for racing was also probably one of my best years for racing, or resting rather. So I think that's very important, is to view rest as part of your training protocol, and not avoiding it or being weak or you're going to miss something, because that's definitely not the case. Especially as you get older, you just stockpile and bank and accumulate all of this volume that you've done over weeks and months and years and decades, and that stuff. It might take you a little bit longer to dust the rust off, but it's like riding a bike, and that stuff never really fully leaves you. But yeah, it was totally. It was a great weekend. I've used Jack's stuff for quite a long time now, with myself and with my athletes, both at the high school level, and now with kind of the adult population that I train. I love it because it's so simple, and you don't have to be a science person, or you don't have to have a background in exercise physiology. You can get into it and dig into it and really try to understand it, but his charts and his calculators, it just takes the guesswork out of things. You know what I mean? Like I recommend his book for any runner, but specifically for a lot of times high school coaches that may not be experienced runners or have experience coaching runners, sometimes get thrust into that position, and with Jack's system, there's really no excuse to be a bad coach, because you can really outline some really good programs for people, and get them dialed into running the right paces and when to run them, and what sort of efforts to put in day to day.
Here, let me ask you a question. Actually, I'm curious. Well, two questions. I'll ask two. One, what other than the rest is a part of the training, what would you say it was your biggest takeaway, and what did, if anything, did Jack tell you guys anything, like what his kind of biggest learning moment was? Like, how did he, like with all of his concepts he came up with, was there one thing that he really pushed, as far as like his thing that really was like, okay, this is the right direction. This is why I came up with this formula.
I think he was, he's a really interesting dude. He's lived in, I think, 17 different places, and that's in and out of the United States. He's coached in Peru. He was in Sweden. He's been all over, and he's worked with, Jim Ryan, Steve Prefontaine, Jerry Lindgren, Abdi Abdurrahman. He's still working with athletes now. So, I think for me, and even looking at the math side of stuff too, is that most people, especially if they're competitive, be it high school, college, or sub-elite type, post-collegiate runners, that are racing and stuff, most people are probably running too hard. And at the end of the day, if you're going into the red Monday through Friday, you're probably not going to be able to, go into the red or go beyond that on Saturday or Sunday whenever the race is. Whereas if you're running at sub-maximal levels, you can always, supersede those, your fitness level or your training paces and go faster on race day. And that was something that really hit home for me because, I think back to, in high school, I was training with, my teammate who was, a year older than me and much faster than me, and I was always chasing him and was, focused on trying to run with him. And that probably wasn't as, I probably could have gotten more out of my, high school career. And then in college, you get to college and there's, 7 or 8 dudes that are, just right around your fitness level or maybe a little bit better than you. And, every day, turns into a pissing contest, and everyone's trying to peacock, and none of us are getting our maximum results because we're so beat up from the week of training, because we did everything wrong, so for me, that was the biggest takeaway. And I've, been learning that more and more as I've gotten older, but if I ever get back into coaching at the high school or collegiate level, that is going to be my biggest emphasis on my athletes is making sure that they're running at the same pace. And, even when I did, coach high school not too long ago, I think in 2014, the fall, I coached cross country again. And we would pair, kids up in groups of 3 or 4, maybe even 5. And Jack talked about, how even that, like even kids that are pretty close in ability, probably shouldn't be doing their threshold intervals together because, even if it's a second or 2 difference in each lap, that's going to only benefit that one person that's at the top of that level. And then the person, that even if it's only 3 people in a group, that third person is probably overreaching, even if it's just a second or 2 each lap. They're still overreaching, where they need to be to really maximize their performance.
Very interesting stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we need to get back into that too. we got a lot to get into, to touch on. Yeah, was there any? Did he share any crazy stories with you or anything like that? That like anything that you're just like, wow, like anything from where he was in the world, like anything like that. He's just like, this guy was like a freak, like the craziest runner he ever coached or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, he had some good stories, and, he got into, why he doesn't really use or believe in heart rate training, He talked about a guy by the name of George Young who was a bronze medalist in the steeplechase for the United States and had some pretty epic battles with Prefontaine. And, I think he said that, his max heart rate was 148.
What? That's insane.
Yeah. So it's like, well, if I have this guy, and he talked more about the 220 minus your age, formula.
Yeah.
But he said, if I were to use that with this guy, what would I be doing with him? He
would be dead or something.
He would be. That's exactly what he said. He said I would have killed him. He would have been dead because if I was doing that minus his age, he would have been far exceeding his, max heart rate and would have, probably would have died at some point. But for me, the big thing that I had a question for him that when we were in a break, I asked him, because I've lived in quite a few places over the last 6 or 7 years, and I'm always searching for that perfect place or what makes that perfect place. And he's actually lived in Oklahoma City. He coached here at the university for a bit, back in the 50s or 60s, and
cool.
I asked him, what was your favorite place? And, his thing was, it all depends on what you're trying to do and accomplish, because there are different perfect places for different people, and that was kind of, it was cool for me because,
That's cool.
But yeah, I mean, it was a great weekend and a lot of good learning, and now it's just a matter of, taking the test and passing the test and becoming a certified VDOT coach, which was the initial goal of that, was just to add more credibility to what I do and, I was excited to meet him, and I missed the boat with Arthur Lydiard. I never got to catch him when he